be honest, back is probably the most confusing muscle to train. From not knowing which exercise trains which muscle in the back, or worse, thinking you're training your back when you actually aren't really doing it at all. So in this video, I'm gonna talk about the 3 most important science-based tips that will completely change the way you train your back so you can build more muscle, actually know how to train the lats versus the traps, and have an overall more optimized split. So here's what we're gonna be covering in this video. 1, the different types of back exercises. Number 2, which ones I actually recommend for muscle growth. And 3, how to avoid involving the biceps and forearms in your back training, which I know is something we all face at one point in time. With that said, let's get into tip number 1. Now, tip number 1 is to categorize your back training into 3 different functions. The biggest mistake people make when it comes to training their back is redundant training. This is where you're involving multiple exercises that seem like different exercises, but in reality, they're all kind of training the same target muscle group in the same way. And in the best case, you could be just wasting your time and energy with redundant training, especially if you're properly training hard with enough volume prior. But in the worst case, you could be actually developing a muscle imbalance because of the redundant training, which of course you ideally want to avoid at all costs. And this is really what takes a mid-back workout to something that's truly optimized. All right, so we understand why we should be avoiding redundant training. Now, here's how I best recommend you avoid this, and that is by categorizing all your back exercises into one of 3 functions. First one being shoulder extension. It's simply the act of bringing your arm down from in front of your body. It's literally this. Now, shoulder extension will predominantly train the lats. Now, when it comes to exercises, the lat pullover is probably going to be the purest form of shoulder extension. However, a sagittal plane pull down with our arms in front of our body, such as this, is also going to be predominantly shoulder extension. Because if you think about it, on a pull down motion like this, it's essentially shoulder extension with an added function of bending our elbow as well. And perhaps to your surprise, a neutral grip row is also going to be predominantly shoulder extension, just in a more shortened part of the range of motion. Once again, if we break down the functions that's going on here, we're essentially doing shoulder extension in this bottom half of the range of motion, but also just adding the act of bending your elbow. So knowing this, it is probably unnecessary to include all 3 of those exercises in one single back workout, since at the end of the day, we're all just doing shoulder extension in different ways and just training the lats. That's not to say that you should only be doing lat pullovers, or only be doing rows, or only be doing the pull down over there, because they do have their little bit of nuanced differences. Like technically speaking, lat pullovers are going to be isolation exercise. You're not going to be involving the biceps and forearms. Rows and lat pullovers are going to be more short and focused. Pull downs going to be more mid-range focused. However, you probably just shouldn't have them all condensed in one workout because of fatigue. Instead, consider doing them in separate workouts, using them as alternatives, maybe even swapping them out every 2 months as a way to change your split a little bit. But point is, don't have them all condensed in one workout. I think you get the point. Function number 2 is arm adduction. This is the act of bringing your arms down to the side of your body once again, but this time it's coming from the side of your body in the frontal plane. Now, this is also going to be predominantly a function of the lats. However, the Ackland study in 2008 measuring internal movement arms showed that the mid and lower lats tend to have more leverage compared to the upper lats in the frontal plane when doing arm adduction. Meaning we can think of arm adduction as predominantly lower lat bicep. This key difference is going to be important in my later explanations. Now, the exercises that train arm adduction is going to be your wide grip lat pull downs, as well as the diverging pull down, wide grip pull-ups, as well as Keenan flats. Pretty much all your vertical pulling movements with a wide grip, so that you're pulling more in the frontal plane out by the side of your body instead of in front of your body. While this is technically still a lat exercise, like I mentioned before, because of the Ackland study, this should be slightly more biasing towards the lower lats. So if you are going to have 2 lat exercises in your workout, I will recommend one be shoulder extension and the other one be arm adduction. I didn't mean to flip you guys off there. And the third function will involve me taking my shirt off. And that is because the third function is scapular retraction. This is the act of squeezing your shoulder blades together. You see that? That's scapular retraction. Now, scapular retraction is predominantly going to be a function of the traps and the overall mid-back musculature, including the rhomboids. Pretty much the muscles you think of when people say back thickness. Now, the best exercise to be training scapular retraction is going to be some sort of wide grip row where you're retracting your scapula and allowing them to protract. Essentially, you're focusing on moving your shoulder blades forward as well as back on that wide grip row. But you can also train scapular retraction more purely with a Kelso shrug. That is essentially the same setup as a row, but instead of actually bending your elbows, you're simply gonna shrug your shoulder blades back and allow them to come forward. And you might be thinking, what about the traditional standing shrug? Now, a lot of people consider that mainly a upper trap focused exercise, and admittedly the angle is gonna be a little bit different from a Kelso shrug. So technically speaking, that could be a fourth category, but I personally don't program standing shrugs just because my traps tend to be a little bit overdeveloped anyways, and they're likely getting enough involvement if you're already doing a wide grip row or a Kelso shrug. But if traps is particularly a weak point on your physique and your primary goal is to grow them, then you could add that as well. But the main point I'm trying to make here is you don't need to be doing multiple wide grip flared arm rows as well as Kelso shrugs within the same workout because it is redundant. So now that you understand how not to overlap these exercises with each other, you're gonna be in a much better place to further optimize your split. But of course, back is merely just one muscle out of many. So if you're looking for more personal guidance to pretty much get an optimized workout program and take the guest workout completely with workout programming, nutrition advice, and pretty much just what you should do to get to your goals, well, I recommend you apply to my exclusive one-on-one fitness coaching program, as that is exactly what my clients get. So if you want to fast track the learning process of getting your fitness goals and you're serious, check the link in description. Now, tip number 2 is prioritize stable exercises. As you know, there are many different back exercises, but not all of them are created equal because not all of them are going to be as stable as one another. And the good thing is if you prioritize stability, this is going to help you easily decide which variation of exercise you should be doing over another. Now, stability is going to be advantageous to hypertrophy because the more stable exercise is, the more force output you're going to be able to exert on that target muscle. In fact, there's a ton of research documenting how instability negatively impacts your force output on that exercise. So what's going to be stable and what's not? Well, your chest supported variation is probably going to be more stable than your bent over barbell rows and free weight options. And when it comes to vertical pulls, avoid any gimmicky lat pull down exercises where you're not using the knee anchor. That is a crucial part of stability on that movement. And other than that, you should pretty much be good there. And since we've been optimizing back exercises, might as well optimize your gym fits as well. And that is where my clothing sponsor Able comes in. They have really high quality gym wear, but I'm just going to let this Attain Seamless t-shirt speak for itself. Now, if you're gonna cop this, make sure to use code PATH for an extra 10% off at checkout. It'd be much appreciated. And if not, all good. All I ask for you is to like the video. That is a great free way to support my page. Back to the content. Now, tip number 3 is focus on the elbows when it comes to the lats and the shoulder blades when it comes to the traps. A very common thing people face is not feeling their back when they're training, or maybe they think of back as one entire muscle group and they don't know if they're training their traps versus their lats. Or worse, maybe they feel it more in their biceps or forearms on their back exercises. Now, admittedly, feeling a muscle training is quite subjective, and I wouldn't be too concerned if your form is already good, but for those that find their biceps and forearms tiring out before they're set, or they don't really understand whether to train the lats or traps, at least from a sensation perspective, these are 2 really good cues that should help. Now, the first cue is for the lats, focus on driving your elbows down to your waist, regardless of whether you're doing shoulder extension or arm adduction. And by the way, you shouldn't be thinking about the movement of your shoulder blades at all when it comes to the lats because, again, that's gonna be more of a function of the traps. But literally just focus on elbows down to waist. You see, the lats insert at the humerus, which means on pretty much any lat exercise you do, if you want to fully contract the lats, you need to drive your elbows down to the side of your body, ideally your waist. And because they don't insert at your hands, if you're doing something like a row and you're rowing to your chest like this, what you're pretty much doing to get the handle close to your body is mainly elbow flexion, which is going to be predominantly what the biceps forearm is going to be responsible for, rather than fully shortening your lats by getting your elbows back. It's the difference between something like this and this. All right, so that was a little bit hard to visualize on a row, so I'm gonna do it again on a lat pull down. A lot of people can probably relate to the same issue. If your arm path on a lat pull down looks like this, where you're mainly getting the bar down by bending your elbows, well, once again, we're not really fully shortening the lats. Instead, we need to get the upper arm down to the side of our body in order to actually fully contract the lats. Because as you see here, the range of motion with this arm path, if we're looking at the upper arm, is only halfway through the range of motion of our lats. We have all of this to actually play with as well. And then the second cue I want you to focus on, which pertains to the mid-back, is think about squeezing your shoulder blades back. Now, a common misconception about the traps is that they bring your arm back. And the fact is, they can do it indirectly, but the traps are able to do this by squeezing your shoulder blades back. In other words, simply bringing your arm back without actually moving your shoulder blades is not actually going to be involving the traps at all. Which means, on your wide grip rows, if you're trying to bias the traps, the most important part of the range of motion is going to be allowing these shoulder blades to come forward on the eccentric and then squeeze them backwards on the concentric. You shouldn't be going through the row with your shoulder blades pinned back the whole time, nor should you be completely ignoring it and staying protracted as well. Think of the movement of your shoulder blades as part of the range of motion. I know this is a little bit different. I think we're learned to try to keep our shoulder blades in place because of the barbell bench press. But again, when it comes to actually training the traps, if you're not getting any movement of shoulder blades, you're not training your traps. Now, if you're already spending this time optimizing your back training, might as well optimize your nutrition too. And a great way to do so is by making sure you're hitting an adequate enough protein intake. But if you are finding that hard to do, that is where a protein sub such as MyProtein can help. Now, I highly recommend MyProtein's Clearway, pretty much best macros in the game. But if you want an affordable option, the Impact Whey Protein is also a good option. And by the way, pretty much all the flavors are good. Just maybe stay away from cola flavored Clearway, but that's just in my personal opinion. But anyways, you can use code TPATH to get a pretty hefty discount while also supporting my page. It would be much, much appreciated. It helps me continue to be able to make these videos for y'all. But with that said, those were the 3 biggest tips to completely change your back training. I hope you found this video helpful. Hit subscribe to Level Up Your Physique. Hit the like button if you found this video helpful. And hit the bell notification to get these videos right to you. See y'all in the next one. Peace.